Good evening and welcome to another episode of the Eve Prosper Market Show. I'm your host, Lockefox, and this is the show for the Aegis Release. So before we get started, let's start where we usually do with some of the show news and information to the dulcet tones of the Eve Undock. First, if you guys enjoy the show, thanks again for tuning in. If you want to follow us, all you have to remember is Eve Prosper. That will get you to Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and the blog. Those are all the places you can tune in. Don't forget, we do have this as a podcast, and if you can't catch the live stream on Fridays at 0200, you can always tune in on YouTube. With that said, the schedule is a little bit weird for the summer. I announced last time 2 weeks ago that we're on a bit of a hiatus. We will continue to do shows when it's pertinent to the news. So we're doing one for Aegis. We'll be back next week for FozzieSov. And we'll probably be back for at least one more in the next month or so around an 07 show. So keep tuned for that. In the meantime, if you guys want to support us, the best place to do so is at our Patreon. I do understand that we are on hiatus, and if you need to adjust your contribution, we completely understand. If you still want to support the show anyway, we are extremely humbled, especially after how much Patreon may have screwed up payments last month. So, again, feel free to chip in there. And then last, before we get started, I do want to share, we have done some progress. So I did say on the last time we were on the air that I was going to take the time to refactor some of the stuff that makes Prosper work. And if you haven't been following the blog, I've been working on price prediction for the last week or so. And so just to go through some of the results there, we're looking at a random guesser that walks forward through time to make random guesses, and the results are promising. Have a lot of work to do to make them better, so we're looking at sell order guesses for Zydrine here, and we can see that for instance, our green line is really good, and our purple line and blue line are not so good, but in a shorter window, they're really not that bad. So still working on that. Here's one off of the Crest feed, which should be up on GIST. The link is in the blog. I believe I've also shared it on the Twitter. This is using the Crest data to try and make guesses going forward. So since it's a random guesser, we have to do a lot of random guesses and find a way to summarize them. And this was our first pass at trying to summarize them, and it's bad. So this is saying that the price of Plex could end up anywhere in this cone. And that's like a really shitty predictor, is that we could be all the way down at 700 mil, or we could be all the way up at 1 bill. Like, I mean, that's 300 million worth of variance. That's completely unacceptable. But a couple other models we're working on. This is an exponential trend fitter. That one I'm rather happy about. This one we'll be working on a little bit more. And then I also explained that we want to make the random guesser better. And this is actually one of the most promising graphs. This takes the random guesser, and there's two things we have to do to fix the random guesser. One is it needs to make better random guesses, because right now it assumes that it's a perfectly normal distribution, so any roll could, with equal probability, be an up step or a down step, and that's just not true. So we need to figure out a better way to seed the guesser, and then the second thing is to filter the guesses for ones that are completely insane. So, for instance, if I'm only rolling 50 times, we could have it that it rolls positive all 50 times. If I'm doing 1 million predictions, that's actually possible. And that completely skews the average here. So I went ahead and used the relative strength index as an indicator, and it goes and it asks, it basically makes a guess, and it appends like the last couple of weeks worth of information on it, and then it asks, does this RSI make sense? And if it doesn't, it throws it out and guesses again. So I'm really happy about this. There's a little bit more work to do to get it ready for prime time, and a lot more work beyond that to actually do something useful with it for the show. But that's what I've been working on the last week. So fret not, things are getting done. With that, let's move on to the news. It has been a hot news week, and I don't have any news slides, so we're just going to have to look at the splash page I have. First, the big one for me is Core Blood Brothers resigned from the CSM. He was the representative from ProviBlock, and it's pretty huge news that he resigned. There have been some murmurs that we were going to lose one CSM this term, but Core Blood Brothers was not the one I heard the rumors about. So I hate to see him go. It looks like, I believe Gorski is being called back again, so congrats to Gorski for serving another half term. I have a lot of respect for him. I know that he just missed the post this last time, and it'll be great to see him on. Also, if you've been anywhere near an EVE news site for the last week, the hot topic du jour is EVE is dying ahead of the Aegis and Fozzy-Sov. There's a lot of great articles, but the best pieces would be to go check out Jester Trek on Rippard Teg on Reddit. Posted his numbers because he has a watcher for that, and the Matani.com had a great write-up that was rather even-keeled. So that was, and links to that will be in the show notes. Also, and I really should have put this link in the show, so bad for me. I am bad, and you guys can all make me feel bad. Is that CCP Quant released some new data. He put out a graph of the NPC Corp wallets. Again, you can see that on the EVE Reddit. Another big piece of news, especially for the industrialists out there, is PushX is announcing a really large price change. And there is a lot of drama around it. I'm not sure yet if the actual terms have been locked in yet. It sure seemed tumultuous when they announced it. But it doesn't look like PushX versus Red Frog is going to be that wide a gulf anymore. So that's a little too bad. Last, for dev blogs, we had Aegis launch and a whole bunch of information ahead of Fozzy-Sov. So first, the SOV API has been updated, and you can read about that at the developers portal. There's a pretty decent write-up there. The Hecate skill book was not seeded on the first day, and so CCP Falcon had to run in and make sure that those got seeded, but it's cleared up now. Also, be sure that next week is the big launch of Fozzy-Sov, so it should be a tumultuous week. If you're interested at all in the mechanics, and you really should be informed, there were two big dev blogs. One is about the SOV transition and deployment, and the other one is about PvE updates. And the PvE one is rather interesting, and if you're at all in the combat and data site items, things like high meta modules or exploration blueprints or those kind of things, I would be getting out of them because the combat and data spawning rates are getting doubled in SOV nullsec. So supply is going to rush in, and now is your time to get out. So with that should be all of our news. Thanks for being patient. That was a lot of news to cover, and I'm sorry for not having pretty slides. But with that, let's move on to Plex. Plex we saw stay relatively stable over the last 2 weeks. It actually lost some ground over the last week, which is a little bit unexpected from my side. I expected us to be over that 950 mark last week, but we just crossed it this week. There's a recent spike up, and I'm not sure if this is particularly unstable or not. We should level out at 950. I have a hard time believing we'll run all the way up to $1 billion with ahead of FuzzySov, but we might crest it shortly after. It's about a 50-50 prediction on whether we cruise up to $1 billion or stay at 950. I'm not going to predict that we're coming down off of 950 though. If we look at the year, the 1 year view, we're seeing that the slope is a bit steep for the last few months, but it's not outside of reason. We're probably going to hit $1 billion-esque. I just don't know exactly when. I don't know exactly the date. I kind of expected to wait until the end of the summer to really get to $1 billion, but we're at 950 already, and traffic is kind of low, so we might actually see it shove up against that $1 billion mark. If we look at the buy and sell margins, we've seen especially in the most recent spike, a broadening of the margin here. This is 24 hours old, unfortunately, so I don't know exactly what's happening right this second. Should have pulled that before the show. And then the interesting one is if we look at the RMT tokens, multiple pilot training certificates spiked big time for sell orders. I think this is completely bogus, and it's just a constriction in supply. We're still seeing buy orders stay relatively stable at 860-ish. So, again, if I were holding on to these, I would keep my eye on Plex as your guide. If you can sell them now isn't bad. I'd try to get $1 billion-esque a piece for them if I was holding on to them. Moving on to minerals. Minerals are going to be a pretty quiet piece this week. Tritanium had dipped down a couple of weeks ago and has since recovered to just over 5.2. Looks like we're staying stable. Volumes are up though for the last week or so. So we may see some more movement over the next week here. Pyrite has stayed very stable. We've seen a slight dip down to something like 10.75. But expect that to be right back up near 11 in the next couple of days. Again, I don't think pyrite's really going anywhere. Mexilon also seeing this standard undulation where we go down as low as 42 and as high as 44. I expect it to stay inside this bound. No reason to think otherwise. Isogen is on a bit of a rockier trajectory. We saw it come down to 100 a couple of weeks ago. Crest near 110, and it's back near 100 today. A little harder to predict exactly where this one is going. I expect it to bottom out near 100, but with the SOV PVE changes and the value of space going up, we may see a little bit more volatility here, and it actually might be positive since the PVE changes are really favoring things like ratting. We might see less supply coming out of nullsec, causing the price to rise slightly. Noxium is on a particularly low point at 500 a unit right now. It's not at an unstable point, so I have a hard time predicting exactly where it's going. I expect it to stay within this 500 to 520 bound, though. Again, same thing as Mexilon and Isogen. Expect the same going forward. Zydrine is another interesting one. We saw it come up to 1500 on our last show, and it stayed pretty stable at 1500. It looked like it may have been losing a little steam last week, but those reports were wrong. So again, I expect it to stay high at 1500. We might see it climb again slightly to 1600 in the upcoming weeks, but that's kind of a long bet. Next, Megasite peaked at 2300 a couple weeks ago, but has since lost some momentum down to 2100. Again, we're still in pretty strong territory. 2100 is a really fair price. If you need to go stock up, now would be a pretty decent chance to do so. It's hard to bet exactly which direction we're going to move in the upcoming week, but this would be a decent one to keep your eyes on. And then Morphite, which has been extremely weird over the last month or so. We've seen as high as 14K, and we haven't seen it below 10K. And we're seeing it settle into its 13,000 price point pretty solidly. Volumes have ticked back from their highest peak a few weeks ago. But again, if FozzieSov really turns the gears of war, I expect Morphite to do another jump as Tech 2 equipment is required. So keep an eye on that. And last, if we just go look at the buy and sell spreads, we're seeing a particularly large spread in pyrite, which could be driving the price down. We see a particularly hot dip in Noxium, which is doing some downward pressure. But Tritanium, again, is looking stable, even slightly positive. Zydrine's looking stable. And Morphite is, again, converging to that 13,000 mark. Moving on to fuel. Fuel is proving me wrong. I said a couple months back that the Amar fuel market was being artificially held up because of the Burn Amar event, and that we expected this particular peak back in the middle of May to then crash down sub 700, and we just haven't seen that come up. It looks like 700 to 750 is a really stable price for Amar fuel. I'm not exactly sure why, but it's also interesting to see that Caldari isotopes are on a pretty decent climb. This is probably due to reaction pauses coming back online, and maybe due to some more industry moving to pauses. Again, Galente and Minmatar have been staying flat at their particular levels. Nothing really newsworthy to report there. When we go look at fuel blocks, though, we see some interesting stories. For instance, Galente fuel blocks, despite the price of isotopes staying stable, had peaked last week and has since come off of its peak. Again, if I were in the production market for fuel blocks, I would keep an eye on this. Maybe get some buy orders for oxygen isotopes and hold on to that to see if the price spikes again. Again, I don't expect it to stay around for more than a weekend, so you're going to have to keep your eyes peeled for it. But it's not a bad bet. We're seeing also similar spikes in Amar and Caldari, but the margins for those should be much smaller, because the price of isotopes is much higher. And then strontium, I actually expected to do a spike this last week ahead of FozzieSov. I know that we saw a big spike when it was announced that that strontium was going to fuel the Entosis links, and I kind of expected another supply run to start happening this weekend. This isn't a bad bet to make, but I don't know how much money you can really stand to make. Getting in at sub 500 is a pretty good price. I would have a price target of something near 600, but at this rate, I'm not seeing that actually happen. But it's not a bad bet, and if you hold on to it for a week, I don't think you could lose a lot of money. This is actually probably a pretty decent piece of pretty decent market opportunity. Moving on to my favorite part, the outlier analysis. We're going to start where we've been starting the last few weeks on advanced materials, going ahead and putting this all in the buy and sell view rather than our single item view. The big things to notice, and we'll bring up graphs for them specifically, is crystalline carbonide took a huge buy order drop, and I think this is due to the end of the reign of the Ishtar coming to an end. We're seeing that price come way down. And if we compare that against the other carbides, the price is actually resetting to a rather stable one. Even though we're coming off of 150 or 160, we're coming down to about 120, which is in line with the other carbonide prices, except for titanium. The other interesting ones were ceramic fibers are back up again. I'm not sure if this is going to be periodic or not. So if you have the option to sell ceramic fibers, I would be getting rid of them. Nonlinear metamaterials are down, and they keep being down, but this might be a good chance to buy. And then, where's the last one? Photonic metamaterials. It doesn't show very much here, but I expect them to drop like a stone as well, especially because of the crystalline carbonide fall. So they might be staying a little bit high, or their action might actually be finished already. So keep an eye on those. If we go look again, we're seeing that ceramic fibers are on a tear up above 240. If we look at the RSI plot, though, 240 is kind of a ceiling here. I have a hard time believing we'll get anything above 250. So just keep an eye on that. 250 is a great price to sell at if you have the opportunity. Crystalline carbonide again is in the dumps. It says 145 here, but it is much lower. I think we're going to careen towards 120 if you can buy sub 120. I believe that'll be a decent gamble to buy and wait for an overcorrection. But again, we'll see. The floor really looks to be at 140, but I think we're going to careen all the way down to 120. And then photonic metamaterials, though they've been rather stable going up, are on an uncharacteristically sharp downturn, and I think they have a decent way to fall. So again, keep an eye on this. Graph says that it'll bottom out at maybe a little under 11K, but I think we can go all the way down to 10K. Again, same thing as crystalline carbonide. If you can get it under 10K, that might be a pretty decent deal to hold on to, especially since you'll still want to go put that into things like bombers and interceptors in the upcoming FOSSI-SOV. Next, we move on to robotics, and most of the PI stuff has stayed really stable, but we're seeing a bit of extra volume in robotics as we crest 68K. I have a hard time believing that the price will stay above 68K. I think we're going to correct back down again, but I'm not sure if that's going to be a long correction or a short correction at this point. It looks like we're going to turn around the price this weekend, though. So if you need to sell them, I would stop this show and go sell them and then come back. Moving on, the other big prediction I had on the last show was that T3 materials were going to be constricted because of Burnham-Marr, and I didn't see much of it, but damaged artificial neural networks in particular are very low at the moment. I think this is a great chance to buy in. They are showing that they might have a little bit more room to fall, but I have a hard time. My indicators aren't that strong on actually finding the bottom of the trough, or else I'd be actually using them on real stocks. So this would be a great chance to stock up if you are in the T3 production market, especially if you're building the shiny new Hecate. Moving on to ships, we're looking right now at the Ishtar, and prices just keep falling. As of this recording, we may be as low as 150 million a ship. Again, as we fall, there'll be a point where they're worth buying, but because of the discontinuity of the 1-2 punch that has to do with the rebalances, specifically the Ishtar getting its slots changed and the drone damage amplifier nerf, both covered in Johnny Pugh's latest episode. I don't know when they're coming back. I think 150 is the floor. I just don't know what it's going to do when it gets there. I don't know if we're going to bounce. I don't know if we're going to go down all the way to 145 and overcorrect. The ship still has uses. It's just not super OP. So keep an eye on this if you want to get into some long-term investments. I just can't at all tell you where we're going to land. Moving on, we're seeing the Kronos spike up to 1.2 billion. And as I've said before on ships like Black Ops and Hictors and Marauders, when we see these spikes, we see a gross overcorrection because of overproduction. So right now, they're at about 1.1 billion. I think we're going to fall under 1 billion, at which point I would give this a buy. Again, you may have to hold on to it for a few weeks or a month or so to sell it again. Looking for about a 1.1 billion sell, depending on the price of production. But the price is coming down. It's going to come down pretty hard, and this is going to be a great opportunity to buy in, especially if you've ever wanted a Kronos. Another interesting one that looks to be on the fall is the Loki. We saw it peak at about 160 million a hull, and it is losing steam and losing steam fast. This might be an effect of the cost of production coming down. This would be a great one to keep your eyes on during the weekend. If you can get it sub 145, I think that's a steal. I'm not sure exactly where it's going to fit in the meta. There's been rumblings that long distance, long range, hard to probe ships might be a popular meta. We might see something else in the slippery Pete, in the style of slippery Pete. So if you want to bet on that, Loki's a great chance to bet. None of the other T3s are really falling though, so this might be all on its own. Next, the Thorax is on a bit of a tear. The actual deltas here are pretty small. We're looking at, I believe that's 1 mil, 10 mil, sorry. 10 mil at the lows and 11.5 at the top. And I think the prices are particularly high at the moment. If you can produce them, if you have them handy, this is a great chance to sell. I expect them to come back down over the weekend. I don't think it can sustain this particular spike, especially with how weak the rest of low-end materials are. Also, the Harbinger is trending pretty low. It crested at about 55 million, and it's down at 5 million at the moment. This looks like the basement of it, and by the time this actually goes up, it might be too late, but this would be a great chance to buy in. Again, I don't know who's using them. Volumes are pretty anemic, so this might not be that great an opportunity, but it being a ship hull, I like to report whenever a ship hull flags are indicators. Moving on to drones. Drones are a rather interesting group this week. We're looking right now at the integrated Praetor. We've gone from about 600K to 1 million over the last week. Looks like we're going to eke into 1 million territory. Again, this might be some stocking up for the Alliance tournament. It might be because of the drone nerf that we're seeing things change. We might see that that people are getting out of your hobgoblins and into different races, even though they were balanced like 6 months ago. So if you have at all a chance to sell these, they are high. Now is the time to sell. I would not buy, though. Moving on, we're looking at the Federation Navy Energized Adaptive Nanomembrane. And as low as they are right now, it really looks like we're in the middle of a Gallente. We may be in the midst of a Gallente cash out or at the start of one. It should be at 150 million at the moment. And I believe that's going to be a local minimum. If you want to go buy, now's a great chance to do so. I have a hard time saying that we're actually going to go back up to 200 mil. But this would be a not bad bet. But the other side of this coin is that it's the Fed Navy version and not the Amar Navy version, which is the Imperial Navy is far more popular. So this is a bit of a wild one. Another interesting Another interesting item this week has been the Ballistic Control System 2. We've seen them on a bit of a rise. We're cresting 1 million, and we've recently come off that peak. It looks like we're going to see, I think the summer is going to be a very popular time for missile doctrines. We're seeing the new missile upgrade system for range, I believe, and with the Ishtar being unseated, there's going to be a search for a new king. It might be the Cerberus, it might be the Tengu, it might be a missile platform. So, I have a hard time betting on this one, but if you're a builder, this would be a great chance to build some Ballistic Control System 2s. Also, this one I find extremely strange is that the Drone Damage Amplifier 2, despite getting a nearly 15% nerf, was on a big rise for the last week and has since popped with Aegis releasing. I don't know if this was a counter bet or a supply constriction or what's going on. But I expect us to be back down at 750K, and actually I expect this to go down even lower, but the floor will be dictated by the actual cost of production. Next on our module watch is the Heavy Energy Neutralizer 2s. Looks like we had some instability over the last week, and then a big rally up to 350K, I want to say that is. Or is that 3.5 million? Can't read this tonight. I think this is going to be an erratic item for the next week. So again, strap in if you want to strap in. Yeah, this one's a little bit lower on my list of things worth investing in. Another one brought up by Knight3253 before the show is the Pythium A-type Adaptive Invulnerability Field. It bottomed out a couple weeks ago, which I didn't announce on the show because I usually filter out these high meta items because they're erratic, and by the time I actually see any action on them, they're not really worth investing in. So I don't really like highlighting them that much. But we saw it bottom out and head north to 850 million, and again, this one's going to be a coin toss. It either stays at 850, or we see it come back down and drop below 750 because of the added drop rates in nullsec. This one's going to be a little hard to predict, but I want to side on the side that it's coming down. So if you bought in, now's the time to sell. If you're looking to buy, I would wait. Not a whole lot of these change hands every day. And then the last one we're going to look at is the CA1 and CA2 implant sets have been climbing. We saw that they did a big reset when the CA4s and 5s were regifted and the value of those things plummeted. We've seen them very stable at about 140 million ISK. And they've recently been climbing up to 180 million ISK. Not sure where the top of this is. Again, the volumes are kind of anemic. If this might be an indicator that more accounts are coming back for FozzieSov, that we may be seeing more activations. Not really sure exactly what to make of this. 180 is a really decent price, so if you have bought in and in the 140s, I think 180 is a great place to sell out, but this trend could continue up to near 200, so keep an eye out for that. And on the CA2s, we see a similar spike, but not as much drive behind it. We see it spike right above 150, and it's been slumping down. Again, we might see this actually settle at 150, and I'd give a stronger sell command for CA2s than I would for CA1s. With that, let's get to the last part of our show, the prediction review, where I go through things I either did or didn't bring up, or things we need to review from previous shows. Jump freighters has been one I've been talking about for the last few weeks. Again, I expected this particular reset to clean itself out, and we saw some heat come back into the Rhea market as we got above 7 billion, and a little bit on the Nomad market above 6.6, but we're still seeing some real weakness, keeping Anchars at 6.7 and Arcs at 625 and Nomads at 6,500, and the only one that's actually high at the moment is the Rhea. Again, I still kind of give this a decent buy order. I think the prices are going to come back. I think the margins are particularly good, looking between buy and sell prices. And this would be a great way to double down on a bet that T2 products are going to become hotter, that the price of moon materials rise. If those do, expect these to rise along with them. But again, we may be seeing an oversupply, a bit of a glut, sticking around in the market waiting to wash out. Next, moving on, if we want to talk about Burnham for the last time, the catalyst we saw peak during the event, and it has since settled back down into its normal place at about 1.2 million, and I expect it to maybe slide even a little further. The Talos has been unstable as well. We saw it peak and fall. Again, I think it's back in its stable space. The Naga is particularly interesting, seeing as it seems to be losing more value than the price of minerals would let you believe. This one might be a pretty decent place to buy in, but again, volumes are extremely low at only about 14 a day. And then perennial favorite, the Gecko, looked like it was turning down in their last show at 60 million, but has since turned back up to 65. Again, I kind of believe it's going to stay in this 60-65 bound, but we'll see what happens in the upcoming weeks. Especially with the drone nerf, I kind of expect it to fall a little further. I wouldn't be buying, at least, so that's about the only thing I can say about geckos at this point. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the show. Again, I've been your host, Lockefox, and you've been watching the Eve Prosper Market Show. If you want to tune in live, you can do so at our Twitch channel on Fridays at 0200 on weeks we are showing. We are currently in a bit of a hiatus until September, or the end of August. And keep tuned to the Twitter for when we're going to be doing shows. We will be doing a show next week for FozzieSov, so keep tuned for that. If you want to follow the show, all you have to remember is Eve Prosper. That will get you to YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and the blog at eveprosper.com, also the podcast. And last, if you want to support the show, you can do so at our Patreon at patreon.com/eveprosper. We do understand if you need to adjust your contribution during our hiatus, but if you want to continue supporting us, we really do appreciate it. It means a lot here. Again, we will be back next week, and until then, fly safe.